Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Brick by Brick Podcast. Joined here today, I have Anthony. You guys may know him from Twitter over at Kingdom Soldier, or if you guys watched back in the day, you guys are familiar with the STiKS Live podcast that he used to roll with Smiting Fatty and Hitch before Hitch's time on OpTic. One of my favorite esports talk shows, arguably the first esports talk show, at least in Call of Duty. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us how that started. Give us some background.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So if you want to go back to the STiKS, but I'll go back a little bit farther. I was a creator of just regular Call of Duty content. Like I did pro tips and stuff, even though I was not good enough really to do that. I was always a fan of COD Esports, but there was no podcast. There wasn't even a lot of content unless you were a player or a caster. You didn't really talk about Call of Duty because people didn't kind of believe in what you were saying. And so there was a point where I decided to take a break from uploading and everything in general. And I made a video, and it was called OpTic Nade Shot. It's still like my second or third most watched video on my channel. It was called OpTic Nade Shot, What's His Secret? And that was it. And I just talked about how great of a dude OpTic Nade Shot was, and all of the notoriety that he built, and how he was America's favorite, gamer, and all this kind of stuff. And then I stopped uploading for like 2 months. And I remember one day I went on to my YouTube channel just randomly, and I had like 2,000 or 2,500 something. I think it was like 3,000 more subscribers than I had the week before. And I didn't understand how that happened. Now, this was back in the day when if you liked someone else's YouTube video, it showed up on your YouTube homepage. And so Nadeshot somehow got a hold of that video and liked it, and then it showed up on his homepage. And so I got all these views and a whole bunch of subscribers, and I had a decision to make. And I remember thinking like, okay, Nadeshot has hundreds of thousands of subs and he's getting hundreds of thousands of views. That means there's that many people that are interested in watching Call of Duty Esports. And in that moment, I decided I'm going to try to cover COD Esports. And so I started making these videos called COD Profiles. And I had so many different series. It was crazy. Best COD videos of the week, where I would do the top 3 videos. And as I started to grow, OpTic was blacklisted by most of the people in the community. And I believe this was around the time of Ghost. It was right at the beginning of Ghost. COD Ghost, and OpTic was blacklisted and nobody would scrim them. And I made a video in my closet. It's still on YouTube. The thumbnail is an up and down, like with black lines on the side, but I made a video in my closet and I talked about OpTic being blacklisted. And that day I uploaded that video, and the next day 9 OpTic members followed me. And Nadeshot himself tweeted that he liked my content, and then that was it. It was like from then on, thousands of people subbed to me, thousands of people followed me on Twitter. I think that was when I hit like 5,000 followers on Twitter, and from then on, I was thought of as being legitimate within the scene because OpTic tweeted me out, and it was really because OpTic was so frustrated about this blacklist situation, but they didn't know how to complain about it without sounding like complainers. OpTic they're not really into like doing that kind of stuff and backlash and talking about others. And so, unless it's, on the stage.
Yep.
And so I, from that moment on, was kind of an OpTic fanboy is what people used to call me. There's a video on my channel, like, why am I an OpTic fanboy? And I talked about how OpTic basically gave birth to my content career. And so as I grew, and as I got, bigger and started to do more and more content, because of these OpTic guys following me, a lot of other players and pros followed me that day and then that week and then the weeks following. And they actually respected my opinion. And I kind of became known as a cool, calm, collected, non-cusser, and that was it was like kind of part of my actual brand, was that I just didn't cuss in my videos. And people made fun of me sometimes in the comments, but I didn't care. That was just who I was. People could come on to my show that I started and do that, but it just wasn't my thing. And not many people know this, but it was Hector that actually was the catalyst to me starting the STiKS Live. There's a channel out there and a Twitter for the STiKS Live if you're interested in seeing what we did. And then there's a whole bunch of their videos on my personal channel, but I started the STiKS live because Hector got me into a Skype call one day. Rip Skype. I don't know why we ever used that, but he got me into a Skype call, and he was like, "What are you gonna do? With your content?" I was like, "Keep making these kind of videos. I'm getting good views. Every once in a while, one pops off and it gets 50 or 60,000, and I was averaging around 20,000, 25,000. And at the time, like this was like 8 years ago, it was great. And so maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I might be exaggerating a little bit, but Hector was like, "Why don't you start a podcast?" And at the time, there was no podcast. None of them existed. And I wasn't a pro player. I didn't play GBs and all that kind of stuff. I literally was just a commentator. And I did play ranked and all that, but I was just a commentator and a fan of COD Esports. And he said, "Why don't you start a podcast updating people on what's going on in COD Esports, what rosters are changing, what you think people should do, what rosters you think should form?" And I was like, "Okay." And I started the STiKS Live, and the sky was the limit at that point. Like the STiKS Live it was the flank of its day. It was the most watched non MLG show that there was. And as a result, I was interviewed by Puckett, multiple times, got to, be on do a show with Benson and all this kind of stuff. And it kind of really solidified me as being a part of the history of Call of Duty Esports. And I did that until I left. And of course, many of you are familiar with Hitch, who was one of my co-hosts, who now is a member of OpTic. And I found him at UMG. He was making little videos at UMG about Call of Duty. Seemed like a cool dude, curly haired, dude with the, his little curly fro he used to have, and picked him up. Smiting Fatty was my first co-host. He was a caster back then for UMG. And then I ended up picking up Landon eventually. He was known as Mr. Rostermania back then. That's Lando, the caster that's currently in the CDL. And then my duo, the secret weapon to my success, was Goalie. He most recently ran the entire studio at UMG. He ran all of Gears Esports, and that was his job, because he was a phenomenal producer. He did all the behind the scenes producing. I wrote the show and ran it, but Goalie was running, pushing all the buttons and running the stream, looking at the comments, modding, doing all that stuff. And we got sponsored by Scuff. We got sponsored by G Fuel. We actually were making money, and there was a minute where I almost became a full-time creator. But I had young kids at the time. I had an opportunity to work for an organization within Call of Duty, but I turned it all down because I wanted to be able to be around my kids, and so I kind of left the scene for a while. The STiKS died as a result. We tried to keep it alive. Landon, he kept doing shows for about a year just by himself, and the viewership was just not great. And now Goalie works with me at the agency that I work at. We hired him actually recently as a producer, which is awesome. We're reunited. And I'm just grateful for everything that has happened through my career as a result of just my relationship and affiliation with OpTic Gaming.
Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, it's a throwback for me because that's when I was heavily into Call of Duty Esports. I actually forgot that you were the one that did the COD profiles. I remember watching a ton of those back in the day. At the time, obviously, I knew that it was on your channel, but that's a little bit of nostalgia for me. COD profiles, and forgot about Goalie. I think Hitch's UMG content at the time that he was doing was the OpTic Intel before it got picked up. I could be mistaken, but I think it was him and Hudson.
Yeah, he did like a weekly esports recap deal.
Yeah.
In UMG, and it was okay. Like he sat in front of a screen that was next to him, and it would play what he was talking about on the screen. So it was pretty innovative. It was kind of cool. And he would sit there and mention like this happened this week and this happened this week. And there was no picture in picture, but it was like a screen that was here that would show the stuff on it. It was pretty cool. I just saw that he had potential. And the funniest thing about Hitch is that he never was like a brainiac about COD Esports. He was a good player. He was a fan. He played GBs all the time. But he never was like a brainiac. He added a bit of light and youthfulness to me and Fatty and what we were doing on the STiKS. And the minute we brought Hitch in, it was like this new crowd of people felt like they could come to the table, so to speak, and be a part of the STiKS. And we kept it running. We would do awards every year, and I would get pro players and coaches to vote. And those COD profiles, man, that you're talking about, those were the things that really helped me grow in the pro community, because I was doing COD profiles on some of the players, and like Crims and Rambo's actually ended up getting put in a movie about him that they did in Canada, which was really cool. Like,
Really?
I got contacted by production studio that was like, hey, we would love to, it was this big whole contract and everything, like, we want to use your content. And it was Rambo's dad that hit me up first about it, and then they showed me the video, which was in French, so I did not understand, but I could see that my content was in it, so it was like, because my story of Rambo, they wanted to basically recreate that, but as like a Canadian esports hero type of deal. And so it was really cool. Like, it was really awesome.
That is really cool. I did not know that. That is really rewarding to have something like that happen. Especially like you said, back then you were like the flank of the day. The STiKS Live was the central Call of Duty Esports hub that covered everything. And not just analytics. Like, it wasn't an analyst show of, oh, this happened, this player did this, they're really warming up. Like, there's a lot more to it than that, which I think was really nice. Like, it was Rostermania. We talked about that a little bit before we started recording. Theoretical roster changes, what could happen, what might happen. And that's something that you see in traditional sports, is all of the kind of what ifs and hypotheticals. It just made it really fun and exciting. Like, I was a big fan. I still do wish a version of that show existed.
Yeah, me too.
But it is what it is, and we have so many different things similar to that now. The flank probably being the number one.
It's close. Ours was a little more ESPN style. We had the
the format's completely different.
Yeah, it's changed a lot.
But as far as just popularity, the flank, and Zuma does a great job. The flank is amazing. An excellent show. So talking a little bit more about OpTic and back then, this is something that I ask everybody. Your answer is probably going to be a little bit different. But what does the green wall mean to you?
Oh, so there's a saying that I used to have. It never caught on, in the community, but I used to say it all the time, which was that I believe that Call of Duty Esports ran on green batteries. And that was
remember that.
It was like, I would say it all the time. Like, the green wall is COD Esports. Like, it's as the green wall grows in terms of, like, as OpTic's, reach grows, so does COD Esports. Like, and I honestly felt, and still to this day feel, like it is the biggest kind of defining feature of Call of Duty Esports, is this group of guys that are in OpTic. And of course, that is spearheaded by Hector and Scump. Nadeshot was around in the beginning, and he definitely helped. If there was no Nadeshot, if there was no Scumpy, OpTic wouldn't be what it is. Their personal brands, I mean, Nadeshot's personal brand was so big that in a matter of years, he now has 100 Thieves that has some of the largest creators on the planet, all together under him in his organization. And they make some of the coolest, merch drops and everything. And I feel like, for me, the green wall, it's not really a wall, because, or if it is, it's like, it's always adding more bricks onto the wall, because it's always been so inclusive, so about the fan base, so not just welcoming and open, but they've informed their fans more than any other team in esports history. Just like, there was a time when Hector decided, you know what? We're just going to let everybody know the good and the bad. When we drop people, we're going to talk about it. We're going to sit in a chair, and we're going to have some really difficult conversations. Sometimes probably want to cry on camera, but we're just going to do it in front of everyone. And when they made that decision to let us into, like, the family, we became a part of the green wall. And I believe that that's what makes the green wall what it is that it's not just bricks made up of pro players that have been there, and from all the different, because they did LOL at one point, they did CSGO at one point.
Mm-hmm.
They They've got Halo and they did Gears, and like you look at all this stuff and it's like it's not just those players that make up the bricks, that make up the green wall. It's all of us. It's the fan base. And they legitimately make us feel, and they make their fans and their fan base feel like we're a part of the organization. And so, of course, from a business standpoint, that's huge, and just from a human standpoint and from an organizational standpoint, it's second to none in OpTic is second to none in their ability to engage their fan base and make them feel like a part of the family. And that's the green wall.
Yeah, I could not have said that better myself. I like how much detail you went into. A lot of people say OpTic is family, which obviously, and you explained how and why that works. And something you pointed out was the kind of open, emotional, let you in communication with both good and bad. And there's been some bad. I started watching back in 2010 when they were just a sniping team doing commentaries and montages. So when they decided to drop the sniping team and push solely into content and competitive, like that was heartbreaking for me. You have the dynasty breaking up. You have Hex losing OpTic for a few years. Man. So there's been some bad, but one thing that they have always done the best job that they can, and I'm sure there's sometimes some legal stuff that they can't talk about or that they choose not to. But I think that something they've done better than any other organization in any esport is be that open to their fans.
Right.
And when you see that across different forms of entertainment, it's never not worked, right? Believe it or not, having an open conversation with people tends to be the best option, which sounds crazy, but their ability to do that, I mean, it lets you in. It shows you their vulnerability. They become humanized through that. They're no longer these superstars on camera. It helps with human connection, which we all need, right? And that's something that, like I said, they've done, and even other organizations that have tried their hand, the delivery's not quite been the same. Similar. I think in terms of engagement, something I mentioned right before we started recording was Rokkr at Champs last year and their ability to get the fans engaged and become part of content. That's something I haven't really seen other organizations do, and I think that's huge. And as you responded to that, like that's Midnight and her decade that she spent with OpTic and with Hex and learning, like at this point, it's in her blood that's just kind of the way you do things.
Oh yeah, her blood is green. Even though she's on the Rokkr.
She might have a little bit of purple in there now.
Yeah.
But it's green.
Yep.
Yeah, that's one. Her video leaving OpTic, that was another like hard conversation to have and hard video to watch. But that's something like Rokkr's probably my second favorite team in the league because of her.
Yeah.
And what she's done and their roster and attach and everything. And in Modern Warfare where I think FaZe was the most dominant team in MW 2019. I think Dallas showed up at the right time to win champs, but I think FaZe was the better team all year. One thing I loved about Rokkr, though, they were the only team that was able to get FaZe to play their game. Every other team tried to play FaZe at FaZe's game. Didn't always work out. FaZe would still beat them, but they were the only ones that were able to manage that fast-paced speed that the Twins or the Tiny Terrors bring to the table. So yeah, speaking on, I guess, Call of Duty and events and whatnot, we have champs coming up. We are both flying out tomorrow. Today, as the time of recording, for those that are listening and watching, is Wednesday, August 3rd. Champs starts tomorrow. Do you have any predictions? I know we both talked about that we don't follow Call of Duty quite as closely as we maybe once did.
Yeah, but so I do a podcast actually with the Minnesota Rokkr every week, every Tuesday, and we just recorded our last show of the season because they're not going to champs. Yesterday, actually, we go live every Tuesday on the Rokkr channel, And so I still keep up enough to know what's going on and who's
Yeah.
where, all that. And I'm just a COD esports fan, dude. Like if I tried not to watch, it would be impossible. I stopped liking, funny enough, like one of my least favorite titles was when OpTic finally won champs. But it's like but now as we go into champs, I can wear this on this podcast because this team is the same as OpTic now, so I don't feel like I'm
Yep.
like, wearing the enemy's, hoodie or anything. But I bought this the day that the merger was announced because I actually was a fan of the branding. I thought like this N and the V in the like this is
Oh, it
so
is clean.
the Empire branding was one of the cleanest new logos and branding in all of COD when the CDL launched. And I was like, build an empire, all the stuff like they were doing. Then they won a chip. It was like, there was something about this brand that was iconic. And I was sad that it was getting laid to rest. So I went and bought this, hoodie. Funny enough, I've always been a fan of Krim. I'm so sad that him and Seth couldn't work it out, and be together because they're the two best players to ever touch the STiKS. And I've always been a fan of Krim, and I am so happy that NYSL made the Cinderella story 11th place to 8th place run at their own event. Like that was Major 4 was so ridiculously dope. The storylines now leading into this next one, my predictions, is that I think FaZe will get to the grand finals. I don't know if they're gonna win. And if it's against OpTic, they're not, in my opinion, because of the crowd. Especially a champs crowd chanting for Scump to basically throne himself as the greatest of all time. And that's what I think is on the line for this champs is like the legacy of Krim and Seth and the best story possible. If I could somehow talk to the COD gods and make it happen, would be NYSL versus OpTic
Yeah.
grand finals. Like Krim versus Scump. Most wins versus second most wins. And it would put Scump in the category of having 2 world championships, but also being the only 2-time winner at X Games and all this kind of stuff. Like he has that over Krim. Like they beat EG at X Games. And so I think that if one of those 2 wins, if Krim wins, he could retire as the undisputed GOAT. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, maybe Simp in 3 or 4 years will have won that many chips, will win 5, and it'll be scary. And if FaZe would have, to be blatantly honest, if FaZe would have even just won 2 events this year, they would arguably be fighting with OpTic for that greatest dynasty type deal if they were then going to go back to back at champs. And like that would be bananas if they were able to do that, like be the best team for multiple years. They're still the best team, everybody says that, but they can't win. They haven't been able to win on LAN. And so prediction wise, I look at the Boston Breach as kind of one of the weakest teams at the event. I look at LAT and NYSL as 2 dark horses that are now in the light. Everybody knows their potential. They both played exceptionally well at the last event. They're hitting their stride at the end of the year. And if Krim drops a 1 point anything, they're going to the grand finals. Like the rest of his team is so talented that they can win even if he gets a 0.8. In the last 2 champs, Krim didn't get over a 1 point. He got like a 0.9 and a 0.89 or something at the last 2 champs. Seth, however, has only had 1 champs where he didn't score a 1 point or over, and that was World War II, which we all want to forget.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're a part of the Green Wall. Like,
Yep.
let's just act like that whole year didn't happen. So yeah, I'm looking forward to like really, really exceptional. This might be one of the best champs we've had. It
Yeah.
might be one of the best champs we've ever had. And I don't care if it's grand finals. I just really want to see. The only way it can happen is if they both win the first 2 rounds. Winner's final would be NYSL versus OpTic. But that would mean NYSL would have to beat FaZe in the first round. Or if they both get dropped and Toronto beats OpTic, then in the 3rd round of losers, they'll play each other. I just want to see Krim play Seth on LAN at champs for all the glory. I just want to see it.
Yeah. A couple things to touch on. Empire branding, agreed. The build an empire thing, like that is probably one of the dopest slogans that we've gotten out of new branding. That the logo's super, super clean. I've always been a fan of Envy. I've always referred to it as the OpTic sister organization. Um, and so when they came together, that is one of the only brands that I would have been very okay with OpTic merging with. And I
Yeah.
feel like the level of mutual respect between Hastro and Hex and business and content, I don't think anybody else could have merged and still had the same results. It's
No,
been
not at
incredible.
all.
Everyone was a little worried at first because the last time anybody got another hand on the wheel with OpTic, it didn't end so well. But this one, I was like, yeah, it's Hastro. I trust him. Like he's been doing a great
He
job
even
with
gave
Envy
up the
for,
brand.
yeah.
He gave up. Like that's huge.
And especially now that when was it a month ago now ish
Yeah,
that they
completely killed
officially,
it.
yeah. So that, but moving on to the champs conversation, everything you said, great points. I think this is by far the most competitive year Call of Duty's ever had. The fact that no team has won, there haven't been any repeat chips this year.
Yeah.
That alone speaks to the level of competition. The NYSL story, right? The fact that 11th, 8th through 12th place is so close that you can just make that jump by having a decent weekend.
Yeah.
It's going to be an insane champs. And as you said, I think it might be if everybody really does show up, I think it will be the best champs we've ever had.
Right.
Of course, I'm a sucker for 2017 because OpTic won it.
Well, OpTic has to go for this to be a good chance.
And
Like,
and I'm a sucker for Black Ops 2 champs as well because that was the first champs that I watched. And
that was good.
Seth's three-piece on.
Yep.
And really just the casting, Golden Boy and Benson. Those are one of my favorite duo casters of all time. But this champs is going to be nuts. I mean, Crim versus Scump. I, of course, want Scump to win. Big fan of Crim as well. I'm a big fan of most players that have touched OpTic at some point. Clayster, more or less a fan of him.
Love Clay.
TP, I love that TP came back to be a content creator. I think he's one of the most perfect fits for the brand in all of Call of Duty. But Crim versus Seth, I think Seth, outside of most wins, I think Seth has the upper hand in every other category. 2x X Games. The only player to play this long, perform this well, but also have made this much content. Right. Every other player that has tried content, and Crim ran content for quite a while during, 60-50 in the Scuff House, and he did well with his crazy animal intros, what did he used to say?
Yeah.
But everybody eventually falls off. They start focusing back on the competition.
Yeah.
The scary thing to think about, and I think everybody knows this, is what does Seth look like with zero content and only competition?
So I don't think he's as good if that's the case. I think if he's doing, there's been years where he's done like content that's not COD, and I think that has a negative impact. But any year that Scump is uploading on YouTube Call of Duty, like pubs, I get excited because when Seth likes the game, then I'm
That's
not
true.
just watching COD Esports. I also get to watch him just fry and go off and teach. In my opinion, him and Nade, we talked about this before, him and Nade were the bridge for a lot of people from pubs to esports.
Yeah.
And still, Seth won the freaking $100,000 Warzone solo thing. And there's probably some people that were like, is that guy that's with OpTic? What? Let me go look him up. And then now it grows the fan base of, it's like OpTic signing Z-Laner. It's like, it grows the fan base of COD Esports by getting Call of Duty players that are regular Call of Duty players watching Scump. And so to me, I actually like when he does content. I get excited about it because he's one of the best. Like at the core, he's one of the best Call of Duty content creators. Not just because he's an esports player, but because he's really, 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 really good at the game and can actually teach you something, if you watch him.
Yeah. And I think, something you pointed out too is if he's uploading content on Call of Duty, it means he enjoys the game. So if he's not uploading content, doesn't enjoy the game, he's not going to get the time in to be as good as he can be. If he somehow was able to enjoy the game, but focus entirely on competition and skip content, that's, I think, where you would see another level achieved, but I don't know. Content's so in his blood at this point that we would never see that. And on top of that, I think Seth maybe has like the look good, feel good, play good thing. It's like, okay, if you're having fun in the game, you're playing it, you're putting out videos, you know people are getting excited, they're watching your videos, you're streaming more, you're having that interaction, well, there's your look good, feel good, you're having a good time, and it probably just makes it that much easier to get into that flow zone and go do some of the stuff that he does.
Facts.
And he probably, I would assume, based on just his entire career, content creation might be a little bit of enough of a break in the action to kind of get him to be able to relax a little bit and get out of that competitive mindset, because you can't spend all your time in that mindset. That hurts probably, I mean, definitely more than it helps, but I don't know if it ever helps just be in the game competitively that much mentally.
Yeah.
Unless you're Illy or selling him.
Right.
Those are two freaks that can think about nothing other than competitive Call of Duty and it somehow be okay. And for them, it actually brings them up another level.
Yeah, that's true. And for Celium, it's like he's so good and so hard of a kill that, you know, it's even like Shotzi, you know, he'll stream just him playing, you know, ranked and stuff like that. Like Celium is so good. Like guys that are at that level of their playing ability, it's hard for them not to enjoy playing because they're just always beating everybody, you know? And so even when FaZe loses, Celium's winning all his ones, right? He's still dropping he's still number one in the league, dropping a, you know, 1.2 or 1.3 or 1.4, and he's still disgusting. It's like Dashy in, what title was it? Black Ops 4,
Black Ops
where he was
4?
a clear MVP. You know,
Yeah.
like this dude was freaking disgusting. Like it was just gross, but he wasn't winning a lot, you know? So it's like there's something to be said about enjoying what you're playing. And Seth is one of those guys that, man, when he doesn't like the game, you can already tell as an OpTic fan, it's kind of like this is gonna be not the best year.
Yeah.
Because Seth's not gonna have fun.
I think, I mean, I did see some of the clips from the interview yesterday, and one of the questions was take any version of Scump all his years and throw him into a free-for-all, who comes out on top. And do you recall that clip?
Yeah, but I don't remember trying to answer that.
Yeah, so it was like, take him from 17 or whatever when he became a professional Call of Duty player, and now which version of him is the best? And I think his answer was somewhere between like 17 and 21 or so.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure that is, you're younger, you have the reflexes and the gun skill. But if you're 20, maybe you've also been in the league enough that you have a little bit of the wisdom. Versus now, all the knowledge is there. He's going through the motions mentally. But the reaction time and stuff is maybe starting to slow down a little bit. He still does some crazy stuff. A lot of people in the Twitter responses were saying AW Seth, which that's a tough to beat answer. I want to go Modern Warfare 3 Seth, because he was like a Modern Warfare 3 Seth was even more of a standout MVP than Dashy and Black Ops 4.
Now you're talking, bro. You're
the guy was unkillable. Like, I don't know. I think the only time I've ever seen a more unkillable player was Karma when he was like a 28 streak on Yemen. That's the only time I've seen someone else be that unkillable on the map.
That Karma.
Imagine going on a 28 streak against top level players.
No way. Karma was so disgusting.
He said I don't remember, it was a kind of a recent OpTic video. I think he was reacting to some of his best moments.
Yeah.
And he actually said that he screwed up and probably could have gone longer.
Yep.
Which is even crazier to think about. And granted, this is Karma we're talking about. He is probably within the top 5 best of all time. Pretty undisputed. first and for a while the only 3-time.
Yeah.
But to think you went on the 28, but you're able to look at that and go, oh, I could have made that a 35.
Right. He was disgusting. He was so gross, and he, like, in my opinion, almost created the roaming slayer role, in Black Ops 2 when he was on Impact.
Yeah.
And he was such a hard kill, and it wasn't because he was like Celium or Shotzi where he's like, because we didn't have all that back
Just
then.
super slippery.
Slide canceling and going, like, he just knew where to go on the map. And it was like you never knew where he was. And then if he got you into a one-on-one, you were dead. And so it was just like, and even watching, I used to watch him play like ranked and stuff, and he would just play an entire day of ranked with a sniper, like with the DSR. And it was like watching Pomage play ranked. It was disgusting. Like, Karma was so good as a player. And I remember when he didn't get to go to champs with OpTic, when they benched him or whatever it was, the year that he didn't go, I remember calling that, and then they placed horrible, but I remember calling that a mistake. And I made a video called, like, don't forget about Karma, because he literally was the GOAT for a long time. Yes, Krim now has 3 rings and has won so many championships. It's ridiculous. He's even won a LAN this year, made it to grand finals of the last event. Somehow turned his team around after dropping one of the other GOATs. Right behind Krim and Scump is Clay. And after dropping Clay, they found a way with that team to put it back together to where now maybe they'll get to keep some of those players when they go into the next season, especially if they go far at champs. But, like, Karma was so good. When he joined OpTic, I knew it was chalked for the rest of the, competition. It was like, I didn't know we were about to see, like,
that roster was already good with Nadeshot.
Yeah, that's true.
And Nadeshot, a lot of people, give him some flack for his pro career, but Nadeshot was a really good player and a really good S&D player at that. Definitely not a top slayer, but he played his role and he played it really well. But when they brought Karma on instead, it was like, okay, here's a guy that's just as good at S&D, just as smart, but can also put up Seth-like numbers.
Yep.
And just be, to me, he's like the mind of Rambo with the slang capacity of Scump. Because he's probably one of my favorite players of all time. He is one of the questions I typically ask on the show is, who's your favorite current member of OpTic and your favorite all time? And my current, what?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, actually.
I don't know how to not say that Seth is my favorite member of OpTic. My all-time favorite is actually Hector. I know he's not a member, but name another owner that does content like him. Name another owner that is going to hit 1 million subscribers this year, probably. Like, there isn't the difference between him and Stro. You said it was content versus business. And it just didn't fit. Every time Stro would try to do content, it was just like, this isn't your thing, dude. You don't need to do this. Like, let it go, move on, hire somebody to come in and do content. I remember they hired Lando for a year, and he was like, he would sit at a desk and talk about Envy, and they were trying to do content. But I think at some point, Stro realized, like, I'm a winner. I know how to win in multiple esports. So why don't I just keep doing that? For a long time, Envy had the highest average placing at champs. I think he said arguably they still do. And he just built winning teams, and he knew how to do that. And so Hex has something that no one else in this in the, I would say, not in the industry, probably, though. I'm trying to think, is there any other org owners that are making daily vlogs and basically setting pace for their players? Like, Hector is literally like, you need to do content like I'm doing right now while recording this. You need to do content and grow your and people have embraced it, like Imbos, who now has like a full-time, career for the rest of his life because he listened to Hector. I wish people like Killa would have listened to Hector. Killa still does content sometimes, but because he didn't grow a big enough base while using the OpTic juice when he had it, he kind of missed out on his opportunity, and even Parasite was on OpTic. I mean, it was for 2 weeks, but it's like anybody that touched that brand I would have immediately, like Envoy did a good job of it. When he was on OpTic, he started uploading every day and was getting 50,000 views a video, and now has a channel that he now only uploads like once a week, more probably in the off season. But Hector really said, I'm not only going to encourage you guys to create your own career outside of the salary that you have that isn't going to last forever, because you're going to get to an age where your thumbs literally won't work. You just can't do it anymore. But I'm also going to set an example of how to stay consistent in it. And I run this org, like, and I'm going to go to every event with you. And back in the Black Ops 2 days, I'm going to sit in the booth with you. Like, this dude was an owner that was present, but also on YouTube. And that's why Hector is easily my all-time favorite. And when I was at, what event was it? I don't remember what event. It was some LAN I went to in California. And I saw Hitch, and this is on my channel. It was UMG Cali. I saw Hitch, so I pulled my phone out, and I'm talking, and I'm like, I see Hitch right now, and let's see if he sees me or how long it takes. And he was looking at some OpTic gear, and before Hitch could see me, Hector comes out of nowhere and just gives me a bear hug. Like, I didn't even see him coming because I'm holding my phone up, and then he walks me over to the merch area and tells the guy, like, give Kingdom OpTic whatever size he wants. So I get a shirt. Then he's like, hey, you want to go over to the pro lounge? I'm like, sure. So then Hector takes the pro lounge. Like, this dude has always, every time I've ever reached out to him, he's responded. He gave me tips when I was making content. He used to give me juice that I couldn't share with anybody. And then he would tell me, I can fill you in on stuff and what's happening as long as you don't put stuff out without asking me. So it was kind of like an agreement we had. And it wasn't like I wasn't allowed to talk negatively about OpTic, of course. I mean, I was a solo creator. I didn't belong to OpTic. But when I would say, like, when I knew that Scump was going to leave OpTic, and I was one of the people that called that, he was upset about why I said Scump would leave OpTic and some of the things. And so he called me, great power comes great responsibility, and all this, and, kind of put me in my place a little bit. But honestly, that guy, and he's helped me personally, like up to, I think it was like 3 years ago. So, like, Hector is the GOAT of owners, in my opinion, and it's without question. And what he's built, the family he's built, he's had to be the dad. And he's like, I'm not going to only be the dad that tells you what to do. I'm going to be the dad that shows you what to do. And for that, he is easily my all-time.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that, again, I don't know if I can say it any better than that. He leads by example. He shows you what to do. He shows you how to do it. He shows you the benefit of doing it and the potential outcome if you actually dump into this. He's not just doing daily vlogs. He has an award-winning podcast. He is a part of almost every piece of content that OpTic makes between both OpTic Nation and the gaming channel and the actual OpTic Texas. Like, he's involved in that he's in almost every piece.
Yeah, he's like the only person on every OpTic podcast. Like, it's crazy. I didn't even think about that. Like, dude is doing.
He is the Gary V of the gaming world, right? And I know you know who Gary V is.
Oh, of course.
And he's actually won at the end of Champs 2019, the kind of last Champs before the franchising went down. Earlier that year, there was a vlog, and I think both of their channels, but Gary and Hex had lunch or dinner or something. They went to a couple meetings together, and he was one that I was so confident that they would end up going in on a team together. And that, like, now, because at the time everyone knew Hex was basically leaving OpTic.
Yeah.
And something was going to happen. And I went, you know what? Gary's going to be the dude that he goes in business with, because they both understand content extremely well. And Gary, I think, would understand Hex's commitment to OpTic or whatever brand they would create. And he'd give him the creative freedom to go make content and do things. So when, the Rokkr got announced and Gary Vee was like involved with that, and then Hex was not, I was very surprised. I thought I saw it coming a mile away. And I don't know if there was ever discussion. I don't know if that's why they were meeting. I would not be surprised if it at least came up. But yeah, Hex is the GOAT. Typically, when I ask the question, I put him off limits because without him, there really is no OpTic. But I feel like there's no better episode to do this, to make the exception, because really without him, there is no OpTic, and everything you said, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. He leads by example, all that stuff. It is crazy to think that he is in almost every single OpTic video.
Bananas, man.
Like that is, like I said it without fully realizing what I was saying. But you've seen bits and pieces. Like if you go way back in the beginning of Phase, Phase wasn't really much, but then Temper made it a thing, and he uploaded and did a lot of videos. Hastro's tried many times. I'd say Nate, but if you look at any other organization that has that level, and these are people that were within OpTic. Look at the content that Rokkr does. Midnight's a big part of that. Look at what Nadeshot's built. The foundation of how 100 Thieves runs is Nadeshot, and the foundation of Nadeshot is formed on his time on OpTic.
Yep.
Content first, open door policy, branding, constant connection, being reachable, being approachable. I remember before today, I didn't realize that Hex kind of gave you that idea of the STiKS. But I remember it was a big deal when he came onto the show.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, he came on twice because he came on the show, and then I did a STiKS 1v1, which was my like interview series that I did. And I interviewed him on that. And it was like, when he came on, man, I remember where I was sitting. I remember I was wearing a G Fuel shirt, eating a cookie. Like, I remember everything about that episode because like getting him on, and we marketed the crap out of it, to try to get as many live viewers as we could, because back then, like, we were on Twitch and it wasn't what it is today, but we still had, I think we had almost a couple thousand people watching, which was dope,
Yeah. That'd be like today equivalent of like 20,000.
Yeah, it would be like the Flank's, highest viewership. That's what it felt like back then. It was just amazing, and he's just always been so freaking generous, man. Just like with his time and with his presence and with his advice and his wisdom. I don't even know how he does it now that you reminded me that he has so much going on with the eavesdrop and everything else he does.
His utilization of time is he's just one of those extremely high performers when it comes to time management. I mean, he even said when I interviewed him for this, like when he flies out and does the Pine Park episodes, they'll record 3 or 4 episodes back to back to back to back to back. He said, by the end he's completely blasted, but like that's the level of productivity that he has pretty much at all times. And I think he's one of those too that like if he didn't have that level of productivity all the time, like it'd bother him. He'd probably fall into a state of depression or something if he wasn't constantly doing something. He is very generous with his time. I mean, he came on your show, the STiKS, pretty early on. Obviously, everything was so small back then in comparison to now. But I saw right before the OpTic major, he was on another smaller creators podcast. That was like a one-on-one interview thing. Guess the guy just like asked him in his stream one day, like, "Hey, can you come on here?" And he said yes. I met him. I mean, I've met him a handful of times, but the first time I had a kind of conversation with him was the meet and greet that he did at a dispensary down in Stockton. So I just drove down there. That's the first time I mentioned this podcast to him. And then a month later, I tweeted at him and was like, "Hey, what are the chances of me getting you on at the OpTic major?" And at the time, I didn't have my tickets. I didn't know if I was going. I had flight credits that were expiring at the end of the year, and I was just waiting for Call of Duty to announce the schedule so I could use the flight credits. They didn't, so I thought, okay, well, I can't go because I was really relying on a free round-trip flight that I'd booked 2 years ago for the Chicago Huntsman opener pre-COVID. And So flight credits expire, but he had said yes. So I'm like, oh crap, now I need to find a way to get to Texas. Said, hey, talked to the girlfriend. I said, listen, I need to go. And so we went. He gave me about 20 minutes of his time. Great little one-on-one. My most viewed video on the channel by far. And he, on top of showing up and answering questions and being open and everything, giving me his time, he then 3 or 4 days after the video went up, shared it on his channel, on
Wow.
the YouTube community page or whatever.
That's awesome.
So I remember it was at I think 200 views, a little over 200. And then he shared it, and within the hour, it was at 2,000.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, look at that. Doubled my view count. He doubled my view count within minutes.
Yeah.
It hit 2,000 within an hour. I think it's just under 9,000 views now. Doubled my sub count like that.
GG.
Yeah, he's unbelievably, I don't even know how to say it. You can't put into words what Hex is and what he has done for himself and for OpTic and for so many other creators in the space, even those outside of OpTic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no other organization I know of in Call of Duty. And even though I don't follow too many other esports, I don't think there's any other organization in those esports that have somebody like him running and doing as much as he's doing.
No, not even close. And
Yeah.
Nadeshot does a lot, but he doesn't have a COD-centric organization. So
It's an apparel first company.
yeah, well, he's not only apparel first. The collection of creators that he's gathered. I mean, Courage, Valkyrie, um, Brooke. It's like the creators that they've gathered are something that Hector probably could do if he wanted to, but he's a COD head and he sticks to what he knows best.
Yeah.
And so, while it makes sense for them to pick up Warzone players, and they did have Courage for a little bit, but when Courage went to variety content, it actually made more sense for him to go over to 100 Thieves. And I really think that it's just different. Nadeshot isn't as involved as now. If Nadeshot was doing what Enable is doing, which is running the content of LA Thieves and that channel, and then interviewing the players and being around them all the time. If Nadeshot was doing that, then it would make sense. But Nadeshot is running a business. He is like if you took Stro and Hex and they had a baby, it would be Nadeshot.
Yep.
But he's not as much. He doesn't have the same business wisdom as Stro, but that's why he has his business partner. But then he also doesn't necessarily have the same consistency and execution and content as Hector. And so I think Nadeshot's the closest, but he's not even close.
Yeah, and there's a significant gap there. What was I going to say? Something with Nadeshot and Courage. Oh no, something I talk about with on this podcast a lot is just going way back to the roots for myself was OpTic, and then seeing FaZe come up. And you look at what FaZe has done, right? They're traded publicly now. They are the most followed esports organization on the planet by a pretty significant margin. But I always talk about, I'm glad that FaZe has done what they've done. I'm glad that they've been able to reach people like freaking Snoop Dogg. But I'm also even more satisfied that OpTic stayed in its Call of Duty lane.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if they, FaZe branching out and doing all this other stuff has helped put more eyes on gaming in general. Early on, more so Call of Duty than other games. And they've really become a lifestyle brand. But if OpTic did that, I don't think it would be the same OpTic we have now. Them sticking to their roots and sticking with Call of Duty has only furthered the kind of family feeling that OpTic has always had, and just furthered really Call of Duty growth. Because FaZe, probably the second most followed and fan-favorited team in the league. Look at their fan base in the CDL versus the Green Wall.
Yeah.
That's a huge drop-off. New York's doing a good job building theirs. I'll give them that.
Great.
They
Yeah.
are, we're only in the third year, and they are doing really well. Rokkr's doing really well. I feel like LA Thieves isn't doing really, really well, but they have 100 Thieves just as everything involved there. Nadeshot, 100 Thieves, LA Thieves is all working together. That LA Thieves single handedly doesn't have to do a ton.
Yeah. Well, the LA Thieves YouTube content actually is. I'm trying to think. I think they might be the most consistent behind OpTic, in terms of putting out just random, talk shows and whatever Enable does, because that's his job,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I think he's the right person because he's a former pro. It is weird sometimes because he played with all those guys, so he like razzes them way more than like Hector would ever do, running a show. Even like if Hitch was running a show for OpTic, he wouldn't like clown them like Enable does. Like remember when
Yeah.
I beat you at this, and remember when I beat you at that. So it is a little different.
Like the only time you'll see that is maybe with like Hex and Scump.
Maybe,
Like,
yeah, yep. But it's still Hector didn't compete, so he
no.
can't really go there. He's always admitted that you guys are way better than me. I mean, although Old Men of OpTic was one of my favorite things to watch when they were doing consistent content.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when Warfare Remastered came out. Like I used to love watching those guys.
Yeah, that was probably one of my favorite years of more recent Call of Duty. Was the IW and MWR year. One, you got 2 games that year. You got new plus throwback. Content was good. We win champs. Old Men of OpTic. Because I used to watch a lot of Hutch back in the day too, before he was really with OpTic, when he was just on Machinima.
Hutch and
So
Nanners and the crew.
yeah, Nanners. I haven't watched him in a long time, but yeah, that was like my childhood. So MWR, seeing all them come back and actually put out a lot of consistent content, that was a great year.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know if we've had. I'm trying to think what year after that would be as good.
I mean, to be honest, and many people might disagree because they haven't liked the games as much, but it's not like the CDL's done a horrible job of amplifying the good aspects of COD esports. And like Cold War was, I probably played that game more than a good number of the previous titles, because I was out of the scene during Black Ops 4, which was sad. I did go back and play a lot of that afterwards. But I would say that Cold War combined with Vanguard, all the games are games that none of the pros have liked. Especially one this year was like, I mean, the number of complaints is ridiculous. You see people, I saw Zero yesterday, like doing a cheers because they did their last scrim, and it's like finally online Vanguard is over. But look at how exciting the CDL is and how much attention it has and the drama, and flying around the timeline. And as much as everybody complains about challengers, I've never known more AM players than I do this year because of all the drama. Like Sensor coming out and talking about it, but then you also have former pro players playing in challengers. Like Clayster actually has a chance to win challengers champs. That's bananas. Like, wouldn't it be hilarious if, I mean, would you count that as his 4th ring? Like, wouldn't it be bananas if Clayster goes and wins challengers champs? Like, it's just, and I honestly didn't know challengers to the point that I do now. People are actually talking about it and talking about who's doing good in challengers and who has and then when I started seeing people like Paul X and Standy and Capsidal and all these people that were like where the heck did these guys come from? Pred and Sib, and it's just like, there's so much content flowing right now, more than I've ever seen from every team. Like every team is doing content. Even the Paris Legion are putting memes out. And so, because I know last year they were the joke because they just did nothing. But I would say that the CDL, like, it's hard to call what game has been as good, but or what year has been as good as far as being a pure Call of Duty fan. But as an esports fan, I can't hate on these last couple of years. I mean, yeah, a lot of online COD has been played and nobody likes that. But they've even figured out a way to make that interesting. Because I don't know if you remember, like, oh man, I don't remember which COD it was when they did like the online league matches, and that was like the that format, for some reason, when and it was not online, but when they all went to Columbus and they would play the matches, even though it was LAN, but it was like you would only watch one match a day, and it was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see more Call of Duty when there's going to be Call of Duty being played, and a lot has changed about this league. I think, having former NFL employees come in, and like even Brett Diamond at Rokkr used to work with the NFL. Like, having these personalities come into the scene that have experience with traditional sports and honestly mixing it rather than just trying to emulate traditional sports, like mixing traditional sports with esports, has really had a good outcome in my opinion. And I'm looking forward to probably one of the most viewed champs, one of the more electric and exciting champs, and you said it earlier, one of the most competitive champs. Like, I look at the 8 teams, and besides the Breach, who I really wish that was the Rokkr, but they just had struggles on LAN all year long. I look at these 8 teams and I'm like, this bracket is crazy. Like, all of these teams can beat each other.
It's to the point of traditional sports where it really is whoever shows up. Because I played sports a ton growing up, and that was always the thing. It's like, doesn't matter who the better team is, it just matters who shows up. And Call of Duty has gotten to that point where all the teams are so, even if you have kind of mismatched teams, like, the mismatch isn't that drastic that the underdog could just show up and win it, right? We've seen that a lot this year, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the league's obviously gotten a lot of hate from a lot of people, but I think in the short amount of time that the league has been formed, they've made big improvements year after year, right? And then, COVID and throw online into the mix, and that's a whole other thing that is just a roadblock in their path to success. But they've done a really good job improving things. They've shown consistent improvement with the league and the formatting, and challengers have seen some changes there. Opposite of you, I actually feel like I knew more about the amateur scene before challengers.
Yeah.
But I think that's because of the way that players played and streamed back in the day. And the constant like 2K and 5K tournaments, like that's where I would see these random kind of nobodies pop up because OpTic would be playing against someone that just happened to get to the top of the 2K ladder. So I feel like, and I also watched a lot more back then. I think the only real big thing that I wish they would still do is have some way for amateur teams to break into the pro brackets. Right. My only idea that I think would kind of work is to have your 12 franchise spots that are bought and paid for that lock you in, but you have a 16 team tournament. So there's actually 4 open spots that AMs can break out of AMs and compete bracket play. And you're still having to earn those bottom 4 spots. But I don't know. I'm sure we'll see improvements. We've seen a lot in 3 years. And it is interesting when you see people like Clay and Sensor in the amateur scene. These guys that are, Sensor not as much, but Clay, a top 5 all time. Sensor, probably one of the biggest personal brands that we've seen over the years. He's done he's probably done almost as good of a job building his personal brand as anybody in this space. I would put him not too far under Scump and Nadeshot. Zuma now as well, as far as just actually diving into content, not just Call of Duty, but vlogging and workout stuff. Like, he's done a good job building his own personal brand. It makes him very marketable and valuable, even though his Call of Duty success has not been quite what it probably could be.
Yeah.
And you even see, he has some clips where he still does a very good job. He's still a very talented player. But I think almost some of his personal branding and stuff, and some of the stuff he talks about and says online has hurt him in a lot of ways. But anything else that you want to talk about? I think we've been going for about an hour now.
Yeah, not off the top of my head. The one thing I will say is, like, based on that Scump video that came out, people are going to start speculating over the next couple of years, like, who's going to take his spot.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen to COD without Seth? And I mean COD Esports.
Yeah.
Like, he's of course going to be an advocate and figure out a way. Like Zuma has figured out a way to make Call of Duty Esports more attractive after his playing career, which is bananas. And I'm wondering, like, what happened, like, who comes in, like, you can replace Krim, right? There's some aspects of him, his leadership, that are irreplaceable, in his IQ, which people don't give him enough credit for. Like, this dude's won 38 or whatever championships. Like, please stop talking like he's garbage.
He's brought bad teams to championship level.
Yeah, for sure.
That's something I don't think any other player's been capable of doing, except for maybe STiKS.
Well, there's people that didn't think Hydra would ever be able to be successful because of the communication barrier or whatever, and so, but now him and Krim's like big brother, little brother relationship is one of my favorite things to watch. It's why like NYSL has embraced that, their personality, so well that it's awesome. Like, it's just fun to watch. Every time Hydra's on, I'm like, he's gonna say something about Krim, so I'll watch and then laugh. Krim's always talking about Hydra, same thing. It's like they have this big brother, little brother, and it's amazing what Krim has done. But looking at the Scump interview and talking about the potential of him retiring at some point, and Hector was like, yeah, in 3 years when you retire. I think Scump plays out Modern Warfare 2 because it's going to be a 2-year life cycle, and he'll consider retiring at the end of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll consider it in between the years, because what's going to happen next year is we're going to go into the first time not the first time, because World at War was not played competitively. So I think, was it COD 4 that had 2 years in a row? But it wasn't established back then. So this is going to be the first time in, well, let's say CDL history, but we can say like the last 8 years.
I feel like you can go based, like, I feel like Black Ops 2, you could,
yeah,
because that's really where COD Esports started to get all of its traction.
Exactly. So since then,
10 years, 11 years.
Yeah, it's like 10 years. We've never gone into a new competitive year where it was the same game, where we didn't have to worry about what the maps are going to be, what the modes are going to be, what's getting GA'd, what guns is going to be the best gun to use, what's the AR, what's the SMG, what's the flex, we didn't have, and it's going to be weird for all of us, I think, but there's going to be no release. The year is going to end, and the league will be able to start the next season in 2 months if they want. We won't have to wait till January when the game is fully discovered and now we can put it on display. And the developers have to change this and fix that. It's going to be like CS:GO or one of these other esports where over the first year we're going to refine the game, make it better, bring out new maps, new modes, blah blah blah. And once we find the perfect way to play it, we're going to then go into another year of playing that same game. And so I don't see Seth retiring in between that. I see him, especially if he's good at this next game, he's going to keep playing and trying to win. If they don't win anything, if OpTic literally doesn't go to a grand finals in the first Modern Warfare 2 season, he might retire. Like, he wants to win. Seth is a winner. It's the reason that I said back in the day he would leave OpTic and go to somewhere else, and everyone said I was stupid, but I was like, Scump Abner, he is a winner and he wants to win. And if they don't drop Nade Shot, he's going to go. And it was like, yeah, you're stupid. Scump's never going to leave. And then it was like, Scump leaves OpTic and goes to Envy. And he was only there for a couple weeks and went back. But at the time, at the time of now, like, I'm interested in who is going to be, because I think OpTic transitions when Scump leaves to focusing on winning. And if I'm Stro, I'm looking at Pred. I'm looking maybe at Simp. If I can separate him from Abizi, or maybe bringing in Simp and Celium and dropping Illy, and Scump leaves and retires. Like, Simp, Celium, Dashy, and Shotzi would be the most unstoppable force. It would be ridiculous. And so, like, whatever happens, like, it's gonna be crazy, because I think Atlanta FaZe has or team options, and they can all stay there or whatever for the next year, even though I do think they might swap out Alec if they don't win, champs. Nothing against him, but I like the role he plays. Unfortunately, he has the lowest KDE and all that, but it's the role. But it's the same thing that happened to Karma. It was his role that made him look like he was the person that was making OpTic lose when they were losing in World War II or whatever. But it wasn't him. It was the way they were playing, and they just didn't like the game. I mean, Scump hated it. And so I'm interested in what the next iteration of OpTic Gaming as an organization becomes when they lose Scump,
Yeah.
and when they lose that raw, talented, also entertaining, most follow, most subscribed to, biggest fan base, most well-known Call of Duty Esports player in history.
It's interesting to think that in both terms of Call of Duty and OpTic. I think if I'm Stro, I start building a team around Shotzzy. Shotzzy is to Stro what Scump is to Hex, I feel like.
Actually, a good point.
He is a younger player, nasty at the game. He is entertaining.
Yep,
Maybe
that's
not
true.
in the same content level that Seth is, but
He's
he's a lot of what Seth was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you just look at Stro and Shotzi's relationship, it is pretty close. And I think that would make the most sense for Stro, but also Stro's a winner. Luckily, Shotzi's a very, very talented player. So he would be able to do that. But yeah, it's going to be weird if or when Scump retires. I don't think it'll be in the middle of the season. I think he would do the full 2 years. It is interesting to think Call of Duty wise, this being the first game since 2007 that they've not had an annual release, and then competitively in the last 10 years, this will be Activision's first true look at what is the current game developing meta, which is build one game and then maintain that game. It'll be their first look at having a Call of Duty run for 2 years, and once you get it all polished out, well, now what do you do? Do you just add more maps and more guns? Do you introduce new modes? Do you do limited time modes? Do you very intentionally switch weapon metas with hard buffs and nerfs? Which I think COD Ghost had probably one of the best years in terms of weapon usage. You saw a lot of variety in guns used that year. And, the Vector was the main SMG for a while. But then a nerf and a buff, you saw the MTAR pop out.
Yep.
So I think if they do that intentionally, not extreme. I don't need a single gun to all of a sudden be a 2-hit kill. But take the meta weapon, nerf it, find whatever AR you think is good enough to get a buff, and give it a little buff, and just intentionally add weapon meta changes plus new maps. I don't know how it would really depend on map design, but it'd be interesting as if they switched like bomb sites or something.
That'd be crazy.
Like you take the map, but you just move the bomb site into a different room or something. You'd have to have really good map design to be able to do that and make the map still flow similarly. Right. But you could also, and this is a terrible example, but imagine, I don't know, like slums or something from Black Ops 2. Yeah. And instead of having a bomb on the left and right side and you spawn top and bottom, what if you spawned left and right and the bombs are at top and bottom? You would still have a left and right side of the map and everything. It'd still be relatively symmetrical. It would really come down to good map design, which I don't know if I have a ton of faith in them doing. Maps have been more misses than hits lately. But it's going to be an interesting next 2 years. I'm excited for it. Modern Warfare 2 was my first Call of Duty game, so I have a lot of hope riding on just the namesake.
Facts.
But I'm reserving myself because I do not want to be disappointed. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm going to have to watch the Seth interview. I'll probably watch that either tonight or on the flight down. Yeah, I saw like 2 clips from it and it looked super, super good. Plus, it's right at the point in his career where those kind of retirement questions in the format, it's a very serious one-on-one format. It's not like the OpTic podcast or something where they're kind of just joking. And it's like, no, these are serious, hey, what do you think's going to happen type of questions. So I'll have fun watching that. Yeah, if you don't have anything else, we'll close the thing out.
Yeah, no, this was fun, man. I really appreciate you, having me on. OpTic Gaming has been such an integral part of my time in, Call of Duty Esports, and amazingly, in all those years, I've never been to champs, and it would be the coolest thing ever if they won this
Yeah.
year. Um,
I'm really interested in the storyline of they win their first major as a merged team. They win at their homestand in pretty convincing fashion. And they don't win without Illy, but then Illy comes back and they win the final event. That the storyline on the impact that Illy brings to that team, that would lead to a very, very good episode of the process.
well, Scump says Illy is way more important than people think, and
I think it's shown all year.
yeah, and when you're missing his IGL ability and the gas that he gives, because his gas is different than Clayster. It's like genuine gas,
Yeah.
like
I do
um
miss me a Ponytail Clay.
oh my gosh, dude. Like,
We don't have any. That's another thing. We don't really have any extremely hype and vocal players now. Not like Choo Choo Train Killer, Ponytail Clay, who's the best in the game, Scump type of players. You see it here and there.
you're
But
right.
but we don't have any. And I loved that. That was the Choo Choo Train Killer thing is still one of my favorite moments. It's just as ridiculous as it is and hilarious.
Yeah,
Plus, it's Killer. Killer's a funny dude.
yeah, he's hilarious.
Thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for spending the time, taking the time. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow and over the weekend at Champs. One thing I do at the end of every episode is basically what they do at the end of Hot Ones. I give you a moment to just tell people what you're up to, where to follow you, or
Okay.
whatever message you want to send the audience's way.
So what I'm up to, I currently am a senior director at a talent, media, and production agency. One of the fastest growing. We just got Esports Awards finalists for Supporting Service of the Year, back-to-back years. Hopefully we win this year. We were up against Discord last year, so it was impossible. But I get to work with all kinds of talent. We have about 90 creators that I help manage, and I work with all of our different departments: sales, legal, talent, all that kind of stuff. And it's a really fun job. And that's part of the reason why I am going to Champs, is I get the opportunity to potentially sign some pro players and manage them. And so that, like, for me to be able to kind of spearhead and lead that for my agency is really, really exciting. I also, of course, do the Minnesota Rokkr Podcast, sub to them. We have a lot of cool ideas with stuff we're going to do in the future. I really want to see. I would love to see their content get bigger, because they do it so consistently and so well. I would love to see it get bigger. Shout out to Midnight Ashley, old school, aka OpTic Midnight. Shout out to Ashley, and just reaching out and asking, if I wanted to be in the podcast 2 years ago, and we've now done 48 episodes, and that's really exciting. Outside of that, I'm a dad with 3 kids that are gamers, and so I'm trying to beat them as much as humanly possible. And if any of you guys are going to be at Champs and this releases before Champs, please come say hi to me. Don't be nervous. Don't be afraid. I'd love to give you a dap. We got to keep a little distance because of all these crazy diseases running around.
Yep.
But I'd love to say hello and chat with any of you guys. And thanks again for having me on.
Hey, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys post Champs with the next episode. Go follow them. All links are in the description as always. See you guys in the next one. I'm out.